I was thinking I was just going to sit there and let Herb keep going. That was quite impressive. So, but before we get started, I actually, I don't know if anyone else will do it, so I'm going to ask for everybody to stand and give a round of applause to that man. He's been investing in this city and in these types of events, whether it's in Liverpool or in other places. So I'd just like to ask everyone to give Herb a huge round of applause, please. Okay, so let's get started. Born in Liverpool, actually. My family mainly live on the Wirral. It was a little bit cringeworthy watching that ad all about Americans just before I came up here, because I know my accent doesn't really sound like it's from around here anymore. But we'll move on from that. So I'm going to try and explain a little bit what I do at Microsoft by the journey I've been on. I've been at Microsoft for getting on for 20 years. So I started there when I was 11 years old, obviously. That's my one and only gag, so thanks for laughing. But I want to really just give you a little bit of an insight into some of the things I've learned along the way and really try and live up to my job title in many ways by just telling you a few stories. And the stories are really to try and just impart maybe some ideas, maybe some wisdom, just about the journey I've been on and what I've learned over those 20 years. And in many ways, this talk is designed for my nephew who's in the room, who's 13 years old and is about to go on this kind of same journey, I hope. So I'll start by telling you a story about how I joined Microsoft. So wind back to almost 20 years ago. I worked in Alderley Edge for a company called AstraZeneca, and I worked in the IT department. I just left university, had been working there for a few years. And we used to do lots of work with Microsoft in the IT department at AstraZeneca. So much so that we would visit the Microsoft HQ, which is in Reading in the UK, at least once a month. A group of us would go down and visit Microsoft and spend time talking with them about technology and how we'd put technology into AstraZeneca. And so 2 years into this gig, I'm sat in the office one day, and the phone rings. I pick up the phone, and the guy on the other end of the phone introduces himself. He says, "Steve, it's Paul from Microsoft." I said, "Oh, hello, Paul." And I knew Paul reasonably well, not that well. And I should also say this is... No, I'll keep going. So I said, "What can I do for you, Paul?" He said, "Well, actually, I've got something I can do for you." He said, "I'm not really supposed to do this. We're not supposed to poach from our customers. But would you be interested in a job at Microsoft?" And I thought, well, that would be nice. I said, "Yeah, I'd love a job at Microsoft, Paul," thinking I was completely unqualified for a job at Microsoft. I said, "Of course I'm interested." He said, "Great, I'll put you in touch with the HR department. They will be in touch within the next few days." Sure enough, the Microsoft well-oiled machine of the HR department phones me up and says, "Steve, we believe you're interested in a job." Long story short, I go through a whole process of interviews and ultimately, to my surprise more than anybody else's, get the job at Microsoft. And so I announced to AstraZeneca, I say, I'm going to leave, I'm going to join Microsoft. I gave my 3 months leave notice, and I was working through my 3 months leave. And a month before I was joining Microsoft, we had one of these regular trips down to Microsoft's HQ in Reading. And so we spent a whole day talking with the folks from Microsoft, and then as you do, you go off to the pub. So me and Team AstraZeneca went to the pub to meet with Team Microsoft to have a few pints. And as you will see through this, all the best stories start or end in a pub. And so I'm stood at the bar, sipping my pint, next to a colleague from the department, from the IT department at AstraZeneca, who also happens to be named Steve. You might see where this is going. Paul, who made the original phone call, who had been invisible for the entire interview process, walked into the bar, straight up to the other Steve, Steve Clark, and said, "Steve, congratulations on getting the job." And Steve Clark looked at him and said, "I think you mean him." So they basically hired the wrong bloke. They hired the wrong Steve. I told that story in front of 1,500 Microsoft HR staff last month for the first time, including our executive vice president of HR, Kathleen, who was in the front row. And I said, "Kathleen, you hired the wrong Steve, but I'm still here after 20 years, so something went right." But what is the takeaway? What's the lesson I want to leave from that? The lesson is that I had a conversation with a friend of mine a few days ago, another Brit who's working in Redmond. And we were talking about our careers, and I said, "Yeah, I've just been really lucky, John." And he said, "No." He said, "You haven't been lucky, Steve." He said, "There's no such thing as luck. He said, luck happens where hard work meets opportunity. And he stopped me in my tracks when he said that, where hard work meets opportunity. And really what happened is opportunity presented itself to me. I could have said, I think you've got the wrong Steve, and passed the phone over. But I didn't. I grabbed the opportunity with both hands and ran with it. Ran pretty bloody fast with it, actually. But my advice is opportunity comes around, and when it does, do not hesitate. Grab opportunity and jump on that ride. Because for me, it's a lesson I've learned multiple times through my career, that when it comes around, don't hesitate. It's not luck, it's opportunity. And your job is to put yourself in the way of opportunity. Second story, move into Seattle. I need water for this one. Technically, it's vodka. Okay, so I've been at Microsoft now, or when this story happens, I was now living and working for Microsoft in London, in Chiswick. And I remember this story incredibly vividly. So about 9 years ago, I started the blog that Herb referred to, this blog called Geek in Disguise. And that blog was basically me just exercising my desire to want to tell stories about Microsoft. You know, I studied at Loughborough University, which if you're from America is called Luga Baruga. And that one went down better than I expected. So I studied information and computing. I basically studied to be a programmer, an engineer, to work in software. But actually, when I was back at school, I always had this passion for writing. I always wanted to write. And I thought, well, maybe I'll be a journalist. But back then, the only place that taught journalism in the entire UK was in Cornwall. Is anyone from Cornwall in the room? Probably not, because it's a bloody long way away if you live in Liverpool. And that's a long way to bring your laundry back to your mum. So I thought, well, I'm not going to do journalism, and I went and did computing. So anyway, I got this computing degree. But 10 years ago, 9 or 10 years ago, I started to write this blog, because I had this passion for writing, but also had this passion for telling stories about Microsoft. And I'll come back to that in a moment. So anyway, it's a wet Tuesday night. I remember this incredibly vividly. Tuesday at Casa Clayton in Chiswick, and the phone rings. And the person on and I should say this blog had got to a relative degree of success in the UK, but also courted a decent amount of controversy. So every now and then I put something controversial on the blog about Microsoft, because it's not an authentic blog if you've got no controversy. So Tuesday night, the phone rings, and I pick up the phone, I say, hello, it's not Paul this time, hello? And the guy on the other end of the phone says, Steve, it's Frank Shaw. Frank Shaw runs communications for all of Microsoft, 120,000 people. I'd never met Frank before in my life, sort of knew who he was, and didn't quite expect Frank to phone me. So I said, my voice goes up a few octaves at this point. Hi, Frank. How's it going? Frank says, Steve, I'd love to talk to you about your blog. I go, oh, this is it. This is the day I'll lose my job. Really, Frank? What would you like to know about the blog, Frank? So, well, Steve, it turns out I quite like your blog. You tell some incredible stories about this company. And I think you should come to Seattle and do that as a full-time job. So paused, said, hang on a second, Frank. Walked to the other side of the lounge. Honey, I think, this is my wife, honey. I think I've just been offered my, no, I won't do that. Because it's being videoed. I said, I think I've just been offered my dream job. Possibly, but I'm not sure. Let me check. Back to the phone. Frank, tell me more about this job. Does it require me to move to Seattle? Oh, I'd said to my wife, it may require us to move to Seattle. Frank, tell me more about the job. Does it require me to move to Seattle? Yes, it does. Honey, we're moving to Seattle. So literally, probably about 7 weeks later, we got married, less than a mile from here, and 3 months later, we moved to Seattle. So basically my dream job. I said to Frank, are you going to pay me to do this? He said, I'm going to pay you, Steve. He says, I'm going to pay you more than you're getting paid now, and I'm going to promote you. Like, this is unbelievable. Off we go to Seattle before he changes his mind. So now I've been in Seattle for 6 years as the so-called Chief Storyteller for Microsoft. So what is the lesson I take away from that one? And this is the lesson, and I should say these cartoons are peppered throughout my talk here from a great blogger and cartoonist I know called Hugh MacLeod, better known as Gaping Void. You can find all of this great stuff on Gaping Void. But this is the lesson, and the lesson I say a little bit for maybe my nephew, is that crap jobs are created by other people. Dream jobs you make yourself. I imagine Steven Gerrard doesn't get up in the morning and think, oh, I'm going to work. I imagine Rory McIlroy doesn't get up in the morning and think, oh, going to work. They're basically getting paid to do their hobby. And that's what I do. I don't tell anyone at Microsoft then that I'm getting paid to do my hobby. But it's true. If you can find out, if you can figure out what your passion is in life and make that your job, you will never do another day's work. There are some days I get up and it does feel like work. But most days, I get to do my hobby. I get to play with unbelievable technology. I get to work with and meet unbelievable scientists, talk about amazing things, and it truly is a hobby. And so my advice to people is try to figure out what that hobby is. And you know, I've had lots of failures along the way. I thought I was going to be an engineer. I thought I was going to be a racing car driver. I took a job and worked at it for a long time being a technical sales guy. But ultimately, my job was telling stories. And it took me a little bit longer than I might have hoped to figure out what that job was. But ever since I've been doing that, it really doesn't feel like work anymore, and I still get paid for it. So the third story I want to tell you is a more recent story. 2 years ago, this is our new CEO, the guy on the right, not the guy on the left. The guy on the right is Microsoft's new CEO, Satya Nadella. And part of my job is to help do technical demonstrations with Satya, demonstrations of our products. And so another kind of brief build-up to this story. When I was about 11 years old, my mum, who's also in the audience, went to see a medium. And she came home one day, and I said, what did the medium say about me, Mum? And she said, the medium said that they see you in the future standing on a big stage, talking to people, which obviously meant this. I thought it meant I was going to be the next David Bowie or the next Mick Jagger. But it turned out to be this. So I'm going to show you a quick video here of a demo that we did 2 years ago of an unbelievable piece of technology. And this was the first ever live demonstration that we did of this technology in front of, you'll see, 16,000 people in a large arena in Washington, D.C. And I'll tell you at the end of this why this demo nearly killed me. One other piece of information you need to know before seeing this. This was 2 years ago, the day after Germany had just won the World Cup. So if we can roll the video, please.
And now, this will be the first time we will be testing it in an acoustic model like this building. And we will see if it works. Fingers crossed. Go for it.
Okay, so I actually want to tell you a little story before we get into this demo, because the first time I saw this technology, I knew it was going to change my life. I knew it was going to change my family's life. So I moved to Seattle about 4 years ago, as you know. I have 2 small children.
And people didn't understand your English?
Well, they kind of understand my English. I'm getting there, slowly but surely, you know. So I moved to Seattle, and all of my family is back in the UK. And my mother-in-law is Chinese. And I've known my mother-in-law for 25 years, and I've exchanged about 6 words with her because I don't speak Chinese and she doesn't speak English. But perhaps more importantly, you know, my mother-in-law is over 80.
For some, that could be a virtue, I think.
This was not scripted.
I just thought of it. Go for it.
So the thing I'm really interested in is having my 2 small children. So I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. And wouldn't it be wonderful if in the lifetime of my mother-in-law, of their grandmother, that they would be able to have a conversation with her in the language? Wouldn't it be wonderful if we didn't have flies around? Wouldn't it be wonderful if those 2 small children could sit there in front of the TV and be able to have a conversation in real time in their language, and for my mother-in-law to have a conversation in her language? So we're going to try and see that in action. I'm expecting a call any moment now from a friend of mine, Melanie. Melanie's German, and she has been celebrating for the last few days, as you can imagine. So any second now, I'm expecting a call from Melanie, and here she is. Good afternoon, Melanie. How are you?
Aber nach 9, Melanie. Wie geht es dir?
Mir geht es gut. Wie geht es dir?
Well, how is it, me friends?
Sorry, Melanie, say that again.
Melanie, sag das nochmal.
Mir geht es gut. Wie geht es
I
dir?
am well. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. I'm here at the Worldwide Partner Conference with 16,000 partners and our CEO on the big stage, so no pressure.
Gut, danke. Ich bin hier. Aber weltweite Partnerkonferenz mit 16.000 Palmos auf der großen Bühne. Also, kein Druck.
Hast du die Weltmeisterschaft gesehen?
Have seen the World Cup.
Yes, I did see the World Cup. Congratulations.
Ja. Ich sah die Weltcup-Glückwünsche.
Ich könnte gar nicht glücklicher sein. Ich habe die ganze Nacht gefeiert.
I could not be happier. I celebrated the whole night.
In einem einzigen Spiel hat Deutschland mehr Tore geschossen als England in den letzten 2 Veranstaltungen zusammen.
A single game Germany has scored more goals than England in the last 2 events together.
Very funny, Melanie. I'm more of a cricket fan.
Sie voll Melanie. Ein Cricket-Fan bewegen.
Was machst du nach der Veranstaltung?
What are you doing after the event?
This afternoon, I fly back to Seattle. Then on Thursday, I fly to New York, followed by Miami, then back to Seattle. And at the end of July, I'm going to fly to the UK to see my friends and family in London.
Heute Nachmittag. Ich fliege zurück nach Seattle. Und dann am Donnerstag, ich fliege nach New York gefolgt von Miami. Und dann zurück nach Seattle. Und am Ende Juli werde ich fliegen nach Großbritannien, um meine Freunde und Familie in London zu sehen.
Wow, das klingt nach einem vollgepackten Kalender.
Wow, that sounds like a packed calendar.
Gute Reise.
Good journey.
Thanks, Melanie. Goodbye.
Danke Melanie, Wiedersehen.
Danke dir. Schönen Abend noch.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Good night.
So you could probably see why it nearly killed me. But I don't know if you could make it out on the screen, that last sentence, which I could literally recite to you right now, because I know it so well now, but it translated the entire sentence word perfect. And at that moment, I realized that the risk that I'd taken for the last 2 days, in fact, 2 weeks really it was, practicing for this thing, had really paid off. And just before I get to explain this, the night before, I've never really told this story before, but I like a good story. The night before, we did the final rehearsal of this thing in the arena, and it translated a random word in one of my sentences into F-U-C-K. Which is not very good when you're on stage with your CEO and 16,000 people. And as I left the arena that night, the producer came up to me and said, "Steve, I really don't think you should do this demo. I think you're going to lose your job." And I said, "Don't worry, Brian, it will be fine." And we did, and not just me, a whole team pulled that demo off. But the lesson I take away from this one, I think, is borne out a little bit from this cartoon, another great cartoon from Hugh. And it's all about taking risks. And it really is, having a healthy appetite for risk is an incredibly good thing. Is combining that with opportunity, this appetite for risk is an incredibly good thing. So Hugh's cartoon here, the price of a sheep following the crowd really is boredom. The price of a wolf striking out alone and taking a risk is loneliness. Choose one or the other with great care. And I wouldn't say that you should take risks every day, but having a healthy appetite for risk is a great thing. So I wanted to finish up with one final story, just around Microsoft. Probably the question I get asked most often is, wow, you've been there for nearly 20 years. Why are you still at Microsoft? And I'm still there because of this, because of the mission of Microsoft. And we restated this mission, renewed this mission about 2 years ago. And it's to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And we truly believe that, and I truly believe it. And I'd like to tell you one final story that I think brings this to life a little. So this was a trip I was very fortunate to take last summer to Kenya with our CEO, and met these two amazing people, Beatrice on the right-hand side, Tabitha on the left. They're at a school in a village called Nanyuki, about 200 kilometers north of Nairobi. A very small school, it's about 200 pupils, ranging between 8 and 18 years old, and a very not a high-tech school in any way. And Beatrice is just an incredible principal of the school, and Tabitha is one of her star pupils. And I could talk to you about them a lot, but the thing I want to talk to you about is the radio mast that's behind them. And it sounds quite boring, but let me explain why. Off in the distance of this photo, on the left-hand side, you can see a hillside, and the hillside is about 15 kilometers away. Keep that in mind. That radio mast, as you work down the radio mast, and it looks a lot like a radio mast that many of us are old enough to have had on the side of our house many years ago, and it has very similar properties. Uses UHF frequencies. Right to the top of the radio mast is a microwave receiver. Below that, a satellite receiver, and below that, you can barely see it, but is a square panel of white plastic about this kind of size. That's called a TV white space antenna. And it was invented by some researchers in Microsoft Technology who partnered with a couple of entrepreneurs from Scotland who are now in this village in Nanyuki to put this thing on a radio mast on the side of this particular school, along with a solar panel to give it some power. So think about the Wi-Fi hub or router that you have at home. It's roughly about the same kind of size. And the technology it uses is similar, but a little bit different. And it has a radius of about 15 meters. The difference with this technology is it has a radius of 15 kilometers. So now we put that mast up, 30,000 people in this village now have internet access that never had it before. Tabitha will be one of the first people ever from that school to go to university because she now has access to the same stuff that we do, to the Khan Academy, to Wikipedia, to the other online learning capabilities. This is a mile down the road. There's a guy called Benson, took a yellow shipping container, just like you would find on the docks down here in Liverpool, cut a few holes in the side, put a roof on top of it, and uses the same technology. This is an internet cafe in the middle of rural Kenya. Inside the cafe are kids doing their homework that evening. The next day I went to the cafe, there were farmers there researching how they could get better yield for their crops, how they could sell their crops for better prices on the market. There is another mile down the road, I don't have a photo of it, the Red Cross office, Anthony, who no longer has to drive a 400-kilometer round trip every week to deliver medical records into Nairobi. He does all of that over the technology that we're all using today in this room, Wi-Fi technology. And it's those types of projects that keep me at Microsoft, projects that quite simply, I think, do change the world. And so I have, I think, one of the best jobs in the world is to tell stories of this incredible company that is helping to change the world, and I'm pleased to be able to share some of them with you here today. Thank you.
We're running a little short on time, so one quick question. And this may look, I've got two questions, but I'm going to combine into one. You can choose which one you want to answer. So, I think what I kind of was amazed by was when Satya was appointed as the CEO. If I remember correctly, did you give the first public interview of the new CEO to the world? Did you conduct that? Is that,
yep,
do I remember
that's
correctly?
Yep.
So that to me was so unusual because obviously normally you'd get the FT or the Wall Street Journal, Fortune, whoever sort of thing. Why? How did that end up happening? Okay, and then my second question, which I don't know how you can change my answers, you've obviously now seen Microsoft, which is obviously a hugely significant global company, up close and personal with one leader, obviously Steve Ballmer, and now probably even more up close and personal with the new CEO. And then what is a major different? I mean, some of you talked about, but I guess at a kind of day-to-day level, I mean, what do you feel how's the company changed, or has it not changed really?
So to answer the first one, yes, I did conduct the first interview. We did it on a Sunday afternoon in the office with nobody around, and then we made the announcement on the Tuesday morning. And the reason we did it is simply that we felt there was a story that we wanted to tell that others wouldn't necessarily tell. And so we took the opportunity to not just that video, but created an entire website, much to the annoyance of companies like the FT who wanted to do those types of stories, and told that entire story ourselves, and have built a whole discipline in the company around how do we tell our stories the way we'd like to tell them. And then on the second question, we've had 3 CEOs in the history of the company. Microsoft is 41 years old: Bill Gates, Steve Ballmer, and Satya Nadella. And I've had the chance to work certainly more with Satya, a little with Steve, and just only a very small amount with Bill. And they all sort of bring different things. I think the biggest change I've seen with Satya is, I would sort of say 2 things. One is he is a disciple of Carol Dweck's book that you mentioned, Growth Mindset, and just phenomenal fan of that and bringing that culture to the company around where do we take ideas from outside of Microsoft and bring them into Microsoft. And so sort of breaking a little bit of the model of, not all of the answers live in Seattle. There are answers everywhere else around the world. And so I think that and just a general openness about everything that we do, being open to other ways of thinking, open to other platforms and other technologies. Those would be the two big things.
Steve, I wish we could talk more, but thank you so much for coming back from Seattle to join us. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you.